Right. There we are. How are we all? I believe this is our first stream of the new year, unless I'm quite mistaken. I might be mistaken, actually. Let me see. It's the first one I've had to put the new year into the name, to be sure. Let's see. No, what am I saying? We had the, yeah, we had the Hearing Both Sides discourse stream not 4 days ago. Second one. What are tilts? It's tilting at windmills. You guys don't know that quote? It's from Don Quixote. The new lighting does wonders for the production quality. How do you think this looks, by the way? I'm gonna get something more for the back here. I feel like this is a little bit too, you know, and I'm gonna move, because I've got a bunch of really, like, shiny ones here. I'm gonna reorganize that a bit. I'm probably gonna move, like, the cloth-bound ones to where that light is hitting, so it's gonna look a little less... Like, maybe I should do that right now. Yeah, hang on one sec. This will take 5 seconds. Let's see how this looks. Equals greater and lesser logic, because I'm 100% going to find time to read those in the next 10 years. Dear God. What was I thinking? Alright. Let's take all of Kant. Let's... Yes, alright. So, I think that in my machine, we'll actually relocate you there. Oh god, there's like sand here. Oh, of course, because I would geotech shelf, that's what I'm doing. I'm a genius. Okay. Got my cat ears for the cat game we still need to finish. Aristotle. Plato. Let's, blah, 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 blah. What else? What else? This one will be shiny. Pragmatism is anti-authoritarianism. Oh, that's looking much better already. And let's move philosophical investigations over here. Oh, that is so much better. Okay, good. Excuse me, Squiddleton. Descartes. Fine. In fact, I think what I'm going to do is move all of you over. This reader in Philosophy of Language is fantastic, by the way. It's published by Prentice Hall. Alright, well, let's see how this looks. So we'll do... Oh, we need to move something down, don't we? Let's move... First of all, let's relocate these two over here. Use this way. Leviathan goes down here. It needs to. We don't have space for all of Hegel and Kant over those. We will, however, move these. Brilliant. These are just kind of sitting up there. Hey, stay put. to, and then our monster collection of Kant. And you know, I think we will actually need to move Wordy back down. Although, let's see, that one's kind of shiny. That is still very shiny, isn't it? Let's relocate you. Over here. Ooh. And one must have something. Must have something to be appropriate for that spot. Nope. Alas, I suppose not. So, move these that way. That there. I will take the Poetics of Space. Pop that down here, so that can sort of go in the slot. And now this should work. Looks a bit better. I don't know. I don't know if that actually achieved anything. It's a lot flatter up here, though, at least. It's more even. Anyways. Squiddleton's got more space now. Alright. Alright, we're done. Stream's over, guys. This is what we were doing here. No, I'm kidding. What if the windmills are tilting at the left? They're windmills. They tilt at the left and the right. Thank you for the $10, Semic. I appreciate that. God, I wish the Essential Purse looked better. Purse deserves much more beautiful cover. You know, I was thinking about that. I gotta be honest, I kind of dig, like, the kind of, like, Cold War 70s look of those books. I like the return to that kind of style we're seeing recently. Near Automata? Maybe later. We do have something to actually look at tonight. Ooh. Ooh, that's actually pretty good. What the hell? Trainwreck Barley Wine 2022. This is actually pretty good. It's one of the few merits of British Columbia, as we have like some of the best locally made craft beer in the world, which nobody knows. But okay, so what are we doing? We are looking first of all at a Demon Mama video, which, I mean, hell, we've traveled some distance to be saying that. Sunday, disclose your sponsor. This program is brought to you by Cortisol. So, let's see here. So, Demon Mama, I actually haven't seen this yet. Demon Mama uploaded a 25-minute segment. Let's get this music off. Demon Mama uploaded a 25-minute segment this morning, God, on the left is wasting time and losing the war. Which I have a feeling I will have some sympathy with. But we're going to go through that. Now, while we're going through that, I need to decide what it is we're going to be doing in the background. I don't think it's going to be near Automata, because that's too narrative heavy. Let's see what we can get away with here. Maybe nothing. Maybe we'll just go through it. Let's just pay attention to it. Let's do that. Yeah, so we're going to look at Demon Mama's The Left is Wasting Time and Losing the War. Let me know if the audio is good. It's a slick animation.
It's happening.
Is it?
Okay?
I don't know. I don't feel okay.
I'm gonna read you a take, okay? I wrote this take, okay?
Oh, Cruelty Squad. Yes, of course. Cruelty Squad. That's an excellent idea. We will do that. Now to do that, what will I need to do? How did I do it last time? Let's see. No, screw it. We're not going to do... Or maybe nascency. Let's watch this video, and then in between this and the next one, we will figure out a game for the background.
It's simple. Very, very simple, okay? And I'm gonna end it with something very special, okay? Here we go. Listen up. Time is our most valuable resource, and to waste it means failure in the struggle against the desolation of everything living in the world. There are an infinite amount of actions that we can choose to spend our finite time on. And unfortunately, the internet is often able to goad us into not only wasting our own time, but into wasting others as well. Most internet conflicts are completely and utterly useless. They only produce emotional desolation and internal strife. A very select few people are able to monetize conflicts like this on the internet for their own personal gain. Think of somebody like Keemstar, somebody who has such a platform and has been around for so long that they can literally make money off of any conflict that happens on the internet so long as there is conflict. But it's very self-enriching. No one else benefits from that, and in fact, most of the people involved will suffer. There are obviously conflicts online worth having, okay? But I think that the way that most social media spaces operate tips the scale of these of this calculation out of our favor, serving us up meaningless, endless, by the way, meaningless conflict, which cannot be usefully salvaged for political or intellectual gain. The risk of mobilizing a following into a mass time-wasting event cannot and should not be ignored by anyone who takes our current plight seriously, okay? That was a little thing that I wrote. Here, let me show you. I wrote this over on my Mastodon, okay? So if you don't follow my Mastodon, occasionally I write like actual blog posts over on my Mastodon. And how this ties into the current discourse that everybody is filling my chat with is that you all wasted a lot of time. All of you. Every single one of you who is talking about this discourse, every single person who participated in this discourse have wasted a lot of time. I want you all to understand.
Okay. Sorry, that's the game we're playing. But we don't need music for it. Okay, let's see how this looks. This is one I've been wanting to do on stream forever. Mostly because I'll never play it off stream. Game capture. Where are we? Says it's capturing it. What if we move it over here? Oh, that's better for some reason. Okay. Likes that. So we'll change the window size. Let's see. Resolution and window size. Okay, well let's try this again then. Let's load it up. Which mutagen? Is it going to give me the option? Oh, here we go. Okay. How largely could the game user small for your monitor? Try smaller resolution. I see. Gotcha, gotcha. So the higher the resolution, the smaller the game screen. That makes sense. It still doesn't feel very big. Whatever. That'll do just fine. Anyways, as we were.
That right now, the right wing in America is attempting to completely dissolve the democratic norms of our current society so that they can replace it with a fascist government. There is an ongoing, very active push at trans genocide right now in this country, okay? I want you to be very, very clear about the stakes. We are living in a time where we have now realized that climate change is going to hit us. It is going to hit us hard. People are going to be displaced. We need people with their brains in the fucking fight. And I want you to think about this discourse. No one learned anything. No one gained anything. The only thing that happens is that people made enemies of each other by saying very, very inflammatory and or totally useless things. I saw people, let me give an example of this, okay? I'm gonna give 2 examples, okay? I saw people claiming that the left is actively and maliciously trying to drive men away from the left, which is an absurd claim, okay? That is something that I think is totally insane, especially when I checked my creator demographics for my channel. I am a very vocal, niche trans creator, and my channel demographics lean 65% male, okay?
That's kind of surprising, actually.
I think the idea that the left, whatever that means, the left is like actively and maliciously trying to drive men away is not only not correct, but it is also the literal narrative that the right says. It is the narrative that the right has made up that the left is just a bunch of feminazis. It is erasure. It is erasive of people. And let me give you another example of an.
I agree with that that characterization of the issue, and this is one of the reasons why, even though like in principle on some level I agree with like Vosh's position on this, where it's like there are a lot of people who are within sort of nominally leftist communities who are sort of reflexively cruel towards men in the abstract. Just whenever the question of like, oh, they're like these lonely people who don't know how to get partners, and it's like, yeah, they don't know how to get partners in large measure because they're a bunch of entitled whatever as a consequence of the stuff the left is indeed criticizing. But by the same token, from their vantage, it's like, what are they supposed to do? What made me uneasy is that the way in which that conversation was sort of being carried out was there was essentially a ceding of territory to the practice of people like Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, etc., etc. Territory that is not being contested, because I don't believe that there is actually an appropriate avenue for left-wing activism to engage in essentially filling the void of a patriarchal guru for men who are not psychologically, intellectually, emotionally, or whatever, situated such that they are going to go on side with a left-wing cause, or are going to like adjust their expectations for partnerships in terms of how they view like members of other sexes or genders, etc., etc. There isn't really a retort. There isn't really a positive response that the left is really structurally capable of making, and it's not a weakness. It's because the Andrew Tates and the Jordan Petersons of the world exist to offer a palliative to a disease that the ideologies they represent are responsible for creating. And so it creates the illusion of the left failing a fight that, first of all, it's not having, and additionally for failing by not having that fight in the first place, if that makes sense. So Joel had a pretty good take on this discourse. Maybe we'll look at him next. I don't know. Like the answer to there being a bunch of disaffected men should not be to offer again palliatives to the system that made them as miserable as they are. It should be to offer them an avenue to take part in actually correcting the cause of the disease. Did you see Vosh's take on the tweet Demon Mom was talking about? No, Leo, do you want to link me the relevant material there? That might be very helpful. We could just go over the lot of it. Are men leaving the left? I hadn't noticed that. I thought the pull the right wing have on incels and MRAs was just a feature of the landscape. Well, that's sort of my take on it too. Now, there is an argument that perhaps more could be done, or we could be more clever about appealing to young men on the fence, or who are sort of like not politically awakened, and that would be a reasonable line of critique, I think. A critique of whom is my immediate next question, because as Demon Mom is pointing out here, what is meant by the left exactly? And it seems like 9 times out of 10, what's meant by the left is somebody encountered someone being a dick on the internet. And I'm sorry, that's not sufficient to ground a pointed critique of a political entity as if it's an organization that's capable of failure. There are pointed in particular and very narrow goals of the right. Their implications are sweeping, but generally they coalesce around specific issues of policy. The left is not defined in such a way. The left is defined by an orientation away from perpetuating the structures about which those policies are concerned. And so which policies are defended or chosen to be appropriate objects of attack is going to be decided on pragmatic grounds. And so, like, leftist infighting, quote unquote, is not so much infighting. It's we have a massive problem that admits of an unknown quantity of solutions, or maybe no solutions, and you have people in various walks of life from various vantage points with various understandings of these problems, or even if they are problems, arguing amongst themselves about what the best solution is. And then you also have people, like, in the midst of the whole thing who are using the existence of these arguments as a way to, like just assert themselves personally, to get like personal validation from these. And it gets really complicated because you're not dealing with an organization, you're dealing with a massive spread of people who answer to nobody in particular. Which leads me to a second point. Let's assume for argument's sake that the critique is correct. Let's assume for argument's sake that, yeah, the left, let's just accept that language. The left is failing to respond appropriately to the plight of young men in late capitalism, or however you want to put it. What are you going to do about it exactly? Last I checked, the left didn't have a CEO. We don't exactly have the ability to hand down orders from the top. So when we end up ceding that kind of ground and having like extensive debates about, is the left adequately dealing with the young men problem, whatever that is, as if, for instance, the left would not have a particular interest in there being a lot of aggrieved young men destabilizing existing systems in some respect, at least in some contexts. What is it that you can actually achieve by that? Now, the debate could be had. There's nothing wrong with that intrinsically. But when you have, like, people with a very large-scale audience acting as if the people beneath them are the cause of the problem, despite the fact that they are not in a relationship of giving orders to these people, and moreover, there is no solid organization that can actually enforce any kind of discipline or strategy. The only thing you're doing is giving a propaganda gift to the opposing side, as it were. So it's, yeah. Oh, Leo, you sent those. Thank you. Let me take a look. What do we got here? Oh. Oh, yeah. I actually responded to this. Maybe I'll pull that up here. So this is the tweet that Vosh made. Let's make that bigger. So I replied to this, as you can see there. Objectively, what is he replying to? He's replying to Sid. The reason young men flock to alt-right MRA movements is because the left gives brain-dead advice to young men. We need to be more compassionate to them for own sake. This is a stupid statement, and Vosh is correct about 50%, and I'll explain why in a second. So, when Sid says the reason young men flock to alt-right MRI movements is because the left gives brain-dead advice to young men, this is idiotic. It's idiotic. Young men don't go to the left first in general when they're not already leftists for advice on what in particular Sid has left mysterious. And then go to Andrew Tate because their local third space organization just didn't have the answers. What Vosh says here, objectively true and correct pilled, dumb. He needed to think about this a bit more, but the next part he says is actually not off point. The left has basically ceded all male self-help discourse to the right. This is basically true, but we need to be very particular about what we mean. When we're talking about self-help discourse, are we talking about discourse about helping the situation of young men, or are we talking about self-help discourse as a genre of marketed material? Because if that's what we're talking about, then yes, the left is categorically, almost categorically as far as I'm concerned, there's certainly not much in the way of visible alternatives to Andrew Tate on the left. They've ceded the ground of giving half-baked, trite, repackaged parental advice to adult men who need to be told to wash their balls, as Mr. Medicare colorfully put it a long time ago, in order to take care of themselves and to be minimally inoffensive to the people around them, so at the very least they aren't viscerally offending the women that they are trying to gaslight into being into extended servile relationships with them. But this is basically true. There is not a whole lot in the way of, shall we say, male specific guidance that isn't just how to be a better leftist. And that is potentially a problem. I don't think Vosh is the man to be saying this necessarily, but that is a potential real problem that could use some actual kind of address. That is, moreover, basically, and that's very simple to address. That's a market that someone needs to tap. This isn't even a controversial position. I've heard people talking about this problem for years, even to people on the right generally. Largely because, and Demon Mom was correct here, the right characterizes the left as being dominated by blue-haired SJWs who hate men. And those people do exist, unfortunately, so take that for what you will. What was my reply here? It's been a little while. Here we go. I don't disagree with him here. Basically, all leftist male self-help is oriented around being better feminists, etc., which is great and all, but doesn't address the issues of men qua men. Trans men suffer from this too. Yeah, basically. So there's an absence of tapping a need that the right is tapping. However, that skirts the primary issue, that the need itself is generated by the ideological positions asserted by or promoted by the right. So it's not as cut and dry as Vosh is kind of treating it here. He's just mistaken.
Another tweet or another thing that I saw, and I saw a lot of this one, okay? I saw a lot of people talk about this one, okay? I saw people spreading explicit, false misinformation about...
That's well put, Leo. It's a bit like saying they've ceded pseudoscience to the right. Yeah, essentially. Or a more accurate, I think, analogy would be they've ceded religious gratification or stuff like that to the right, which, like, of course they have. The left is, if it's anything at all coherently, it is defined by agitating against existing structures. It is not conservative. If you're comforting people within existing structures, you are helping those structures to perpetuate further, because the agitation against them, the agitation caused by them rather, is one of the major drivers that gets people to revise their perspectives on things. I disagree that the right promotes or puts us forward. The global system does as we are all still alienated. Yeah, but what's the global system, Brooks? The defense of the global system, the global capitalist system, is not the left. That's the purview of the right, and maybe they're useful idiots, but... Bluestone put a link to something about this in the chat above. Let me see. Swipe up in chat to see my input where I think you should go. Oh, Vosh's... Oh, okay. No, this is good, actually. So I think what we'll do is we'll look at this first, and then we'll continue with the Demon Mama one. Oh, that's the wrong... What the... That link is dead, Bluestone. Can you send it to me in DMs on Discord? I can't really link... Chat is not a good place for links on YouTube. YouTube tries to squeeze them all out. It's really stupid.
A popular content creator.
I'll try to find it myself.
The example that I'm going to use on hand here is Vosh. I saw people en masse, lefties, who supposedly care about truth and honesty, spreading out of context clips, claiming that Vosh did things that he didn't do, basically behaving indistinguishable from a right-wing troll, spreading genuine misinformation, okay? So I saw both of these things, and I want you to understand that both of them are dead wrong. This is not me both sidesing. This is me pointing out the fact that no one is gaining anything from either one of these claims. No one is gaining anything from this conversation.
Brooks, if you want to come in and say hi, I'd be happy to hear you out.
I mean it. I actually mean it. You would be better serving your time doing anything else than participating in this discourse. Anything. Literally anything. You could be having fun with your family. You could be petting a dog. You could be laughing at something. But instead, people are engaging in a never-ending, I called it a cracker Ouroboros, okay? Because that's what it feels like. It's a bunch of people eating their own tail for hours and hours on end. And guess what's even worse? It's not just content creators. It's not just Twitter posters. It's the followings of all of these people are being flung into a useless battle. A totally useless battle that only demoralizes, that only creates rifts where formerly there were not rifts. This is bad. Okay? It is bad for us to behave this way. It is bad for the online left, however broadly you want to do that, to behave like this. And I want you to understand that this is a failing. This is a failing. The online left is seen as a joke, not because of bad takes, not because of anything other than the fact that the online left can never actually connect to real causes. That the online left is siloed off away from the rest of the people struggling against the worst shit that you can possibly imagine. There is a fascist awakening, a fascist revolution that is brewing in America. I mean that 100%. I hope you understand those stakes. And we're wasting our time not even actually having a conversation. No one who was engaged in the current discourse was talking about the same subject. There were people talking about whether or not, there were people talking about nature versus nurture. There were people talking about whether or not it's about like coddling MRAs or incels. There were people talking about that the left is secretly full of feminazis, which sounds like Tucker Carlson. There was a talk about whether or not the left is like fostering misandry on a meaningful level. this entire topic has been a giant waste of every single person's time, and no one has learned anything. No one has gained anything. No one was recruited as a result of this. No one improved their advocacy as a result of this. The only product has been people feeling bad, people getting angry at each other, and wasting time.
And she's right. The conversation around the topic should be had, but it absolutely shouldn't be had by everybody screaming at each other independently on Twitter as if there is any way possible to actually reach a consensus by that method and action it, even if you did. It's actually truly a waste of time. It's a conversation like this. This would be a great topic, for instance, how to reach the young men that Andrew Tate is targeting, or people like that, or Jordan Peterson is targeting. That would be a really interesting panel to have, where you have carefully curated members who can have a productive conversation about that, who have a lead up time to prepare an actual, like, well thought out statement on that. That'd be interesting. People fighting left, right, and center on Twitter about whether or not someone like Vosh is personally abetting the right by saying, like, frankly, I disagree with this statement here, but this isn't insane. Objectively true, the left has basically ceded all male self-help discourse to the right. There's a critique here that you can levy, in that I don't think he's, we're going to watch him in a second, I don't think he's thoroughly considered what male self-help discourse generally includes, and what sort of motivates it, and why that might complicate things, like just, whatever not seating it would look like in his imagination. But he is correct, this is not a controversial position. There are no prominent left-wing equivalents or challengers to Andrew Tate, who aren't just advocating the same thing they've always been advocating, which is good, frankly. But if you're assuming that the absence of outreach to that community in particular on those terms is a problem, which a lot of people do, because again, like Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, etc., they have very successfully sold themselves as people who are filling a deep cultural need, an eternal cultural need, in fact. Then that absence looks like a failure. Now here's where it gets complicated. The fact that absence looks like a failure, and that we have no political retort to that represents a failure somewhere else. There is a failure going on. This is an actual weakness. We have found ourselves disarmed, and that's an interesting conversation. I'm going to bring on Brooks. He had something to say. Hey, how you doing?
How are you doing, sir?
Oh, not sleeping. I'm tired.
okay.
Everything hurts, but it's going swell otherwise. How are you?
Well, I'm going to do my best not to make this terribly more painful for you.
Bless you, sir.
Well, this discourse, I think, has been really fascinating, because anytime, and I'm sorry if I'm talking funny, I bit my tongue severely badly, actually,
Oh, damn.
3 days ago. So I'm talking silly right now, but that's just the way it's going to sound for a little bit, and you can deal with it. So there's a couple of issues I have with the overall discourse, and I want to kind of go back to what I think, and it's a framing question. I think the underlying thing that Sid and Vosh are aiming at, this idea that there is a general abandonment of this, the younger male cis white class, that there's just no on-roading them. And I watched a little bit in clips of Vosh sort of talking about how they get turned into Peterson and then they make their way down. I'm very hesitant to say that I think his argument, or at least it should be, is around the idea of, like, let's aim at 17-year-olds and 22-year-olds who are already into Tate, and then let's try to figure out how to reconvert them. Because I don't think that's, I think we're maybe a little late. If you're down that road, it may be a little bit late for us to make that move. But I do think there is a weird thing I've seen happen with this, and there are edges of it in almost every discussion. If I were to say, hey, it turns out that the majority of white men voted for Donald Trump. We need to reach out more to white men. We need to figure out structurally how we can shift things in order to make it so white men are not as prone towards that. That absolutely gets people shit on, and it's really wild. Whereas conversely, if I were to say, actually the conservative black men, most black men end up being conservative. They end up voting more towards the Democrats, but they're also more prone to violence because of various things. We would have a discussion about intersectionality, class, and race, and how it affects people, and how people are born into these situations, and how the situations produce them, and how they come out. For some reason, white men seem to be, I don't know, the ones that we are able to say, oh no, they've made their choices, instead of taking a look at the systems underneath it that make it, which we would do for any other intersectional class, race, grouping, sexuality, whatever it may be. And I think that has been really fascinating to see why. And I would ask, why do we give this special privilege to white men as being the ones who are capable? Oh, they could make their change, and we're just not going to be able to do it. And really, they're almost superpowered. We can't rebuild society in order to fix that, because it is, in my mind, the exact same structural issues that can be worked on and fixed, and that self-help, the onboarding of proper thought, and again, leftist thought for forever has been about education and teaching and reaching out and all of these things. Bell Hooks, who recently passed, basically dedicated her life to this. But if you go back, like Marx did this, Nietzsche wrote absolutely books on ethics and how to be that are absolutely almost advice guides. Deleuze's entire oeuvre is called on how to live a non-fascist life. Like, these are prescriptive things. They're complicated and they're sort of, I'd say, on the back burner, but they are that. They're open. And why aren't we doing a large scale, assessment of what drives this? Because, I made my comment earlier in the chat where I was like, hey, why aren't we, going after that? It's about, what was it exactly that I said? I want to make sure I get it right. The right defensive system. Yes, this is what you said. You're like, yeah, but the right is, and self-help is in defense of capitalism. And it's like, yeah, but people always want to defend the system they're in, but their alienation is from existence. Everyone is alienated. There's no one who's not. Everyone is experiencing this, the nature of sort of late capitalism. So yeah, the right is going to defend the system, but we can give alternatives, and we can do it in very simple ways. I go back, very simple things, children's movies and stories and fables, all the way through how leftist narratives can be carved into books and texts and ethical guides.
Anti-racist baby didn't do it for you, huh?
It's over the line. It's too heady. We leftism as a movement. A Brave Little Toaster is a Marxist film through and through. Like, these are things we can be doing and building into. Now, we concede all cultural hegemony absolutely to the right. And that is where I would argue we've done. And that's what my argument is.
Fair enough. I think the problem we're looking at, though, is that the buy-in, like the intellectual buy-in, the amount of work you have to do to make a lot of these things, like, legible, much less appealing, to a young audience that is coming from an education system that just betrays them from go, it's just too high. Like, the reason why someone like Roger Scruton has so much uptake in like conservative circles is because these are people largely who have not been educated to a point where they can understand art as being anything more than something which is intended to stroke off your own imagination. Like, it can't be critiquing something that's degenerate. It can't be portraying something as ugly, because only
that's totalizing and essentializing. Let's take another move. Are women to be given up on? Because again, almost half of women.
Well, if you asked that question, you said white women. You probably find a sizable split there.
Yeah, women in general.
Yeah,
45% voted for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So that's almost half. So are we just, like, if they're there, we're just giving up? Like, I'm just where is the line when we talk about the sort of normative power hegemony, and when are we looking at intersectionality from a position of, hey, again, classic feminism, the good stuff, is about bringing down equality and shifting all of the discussions so we can have that. And so when we talk about a Jordan Peterson, we can critique easily. His 12 rules are absolutely the reactionary version of some very, very simple leftist things.
Yeah.
These are not difficult bits, but
in fact, one of the like centerpieces of his mystique is that he dips his toe just a little bit and poisons himself just a little bit with concerns that seem on some level to be kind of challenging the right generally. But like at bottom it still culminates in the same place. I was gonna say something, I just lost it. Are you familiar with Robert Michel's political parties?
No, please explain.
Okay, so he is a fascist student of Max Weber's, who,
of course,
yeah, you know the iron law of oligarchy.
Yeah.
So that originates with him, but the basic idea is that it's super stupid and obvious, but the conditions of democratic politics lead an anti-democratic party to behave in an uncharacteristically democratic way. And the need to sustain the existence and efficacy of the party leads democratic parties to behave in an undemocratic way. And so there is like a conservatizing dynamic within political parties themselves, or political movements generally, that results in them behaving in a way as a consequence of the necessities of sustaining themselves, as if they were sustaining another state, almost, where they will tend to embody those qualities that they are themselves critiquing at some level. And so like at bottom, at the end of the day, every political party is going to be oligarchic. Every state's going to be oligarchic, regardless of their mission statement, their constitution, whatever. Why? Because that's the lowest, that's the center of gravity along multiple axes. It's just where everything ends up falling pragmatically, as well as selfishly for the people who are actually occupying those stations. I think what we're witnessing here, because again, like my critique is not of this being addressed as an issue. My primary critique is of this being, and I agree with Demon Mama here, this is being addressed as like an issue to be cast to the mob, where you just have a whole bunch of people with no accountability. There's no buy-in to actually being able to take part in the discourse. Nobody actually has to prove themselves first, and it's just or even like have any kind of.
And this is my frustration with what the things I've seen out of Vosh is he doesn't do anything prescriptive. His handful of things is basically doing like a how do you date? Well, dude, come on. We need to be having a different discussion, because again, to go back to my sort of real point here, and the thing that I find frustrating, there is leftist content, sure. There are leftist thinkers, sure. What's happened over the last 100 years in general leftist discourse is we have ceded the simple conversations. We've ceded the digestible conversations to the right. If you go back and you read workers' pamphlets from the 1900s to 1920s, when unions were at their best, where men and women were willing to die, women were willing to get out and fight for their right to vote. The discourse was simple. They knew how to write proper leftist propaganda, and they knew how to meet people where they were. We, as leftists, and I would say this is across the board, this is Demon Mama, this is you, this is me, this is Vosh, there is a headiness to just generally what we're talking about. Feminism, isms in general. What do we talk about when we mean queer, genderqueer? Am I allowed to use that term? What's the setup? What do we mean by race, like, the right has basically taken over popular conversation. And that is, if there is an underlying thing that I think is being hinted at here, it is, how do we create mainstream leftist content that can properly be digested by people in a much more simplistic way that can hit them more in their core? And that's something that the right has absolutely excelled at, and the left absolutely has, in my mind, given up on. When you look at kind of across the board, even semi-leftist Hollywood messaging, we haven't seen a lot of it since the 80s. The closest we come is in the sort of Avatar style leftism, which is like ecological message, but ultimately, it's its own thing.
That's a good point. Now, it actually dovetails with where I was going with the Road Michelle stuff. So what we're finding ourselves in, though, is a situation of cross purposes. Again, like, this is a conversation primarily that is being had by content creators and people in the online media sphere, which is important in its own way. But this comes with its own set of conflicts of interest. In particular, we once again don't have the capacity to dictate, nobody does, to dictate a program or a strategy down the line, so that when someone makes a positive attempt, simply, without telegraphing that to the world at large, hey, I think the left is failing to do this kind of thing, causing a blah, 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 blah. Without doing that, they find themselves immediately under attack by a whole bunch of people with a very loud voice, and they are disarmed in terms of how to deal with that. They can't just sweep that aside. There's no institution that sorts out good ideas from bad ideas, or at the very least commits us to some plan so something can maybe succeed. Even if a nuanced view on that issue is taken, as soon as it is articulated or any move is made upon it, there are a whole lot of people who have various conflicting, often dishonorable reasons for contesting it, who have a whole lot of really valid reasons also that they can levy to do so. And so we're at sort of an impasse here because, well, like you asked earlier, why white men in particular? Well, the problem is that it's not just a passive population, it is itself a weaponized population. And so we have to balance the risk, and there's an additional element to this, which I'll get to in a second. We have to balance the risk of potentially ceding rhetorical ground that empowers the weaponization of that demographic. But
how does the demographic come to be weaponized?
It doesn't matter at this point, because they
no.
are.
What do you mean by weaponized then? Let's. I just want to understand what you mean.
What I mean by weaponized is that the manner in which that demographic, as such, that is not as like leftist first, not as whatever first, but as that demographic first, how that demographic gets brought into the conversation is through the presentation of the world as being the way it is because of the ills wrought upon it by the other side before they ever encounter the other side. And so when you have, generally speaking, large numbers of young white men who are following someone like Andrew Tate suddenly coming in, and suddenly you become visible to them, you become visible to them as an enemy. They are not receptive to you, and they don't generally have the wherewithal or the tool set to ever become receptive to you, pending like a long process that you don't have the ability or energy to embark upon. And now there's an additional problem past this point, because let's say you decide to, well, you are surrounded on all sides by other people of equal or greater scale, or large numbers of people who collectively make up a greater scale or who have more clout than you generally, or who give the perception of widespread condemnation of your position, which itself weakens it. You have all of those people who may decide otherwise, who then may jump on you for the worst possible outcome. And so you're arrested. Which is why my critique lends to the fact that this was put on Twitter at all. This should have been something that was decided upon sort of quietly, and a plan should have been made, and then something should have been actioned in a subtle way that actually results in potentially, some kind of something. I don't know what that is.
No, I'm not going to disagree that the reality is we need to figure out a prescriptive actual move forward that just bitching does nothing. Mm-hmm. I not disagreement with you at all. We've actually talked about this. Yes. I think over time it's been the number one thing we have constantly come back to, that really what we're talking about is figuring out what is, I call it the leftist project, but whatever it is, we need a message. But this is, again, the underlying thing that we're aiming it at white men, and it's, to me, this is not the placement on all of this, as if it is a choice, as if it is like we're making decisions,
Yes.
is where I get very frustrated overall with this. Because the reality is, white men overwhelmingly are put in the position of becoming reactionary because they are produced under the same capitalism in the same world, in the same United States, that puts minorities and others on the defensive. And that conversation and that production of people is at the base of it. And so we are, generally speaking, the battle we're fighting, and it is against almost half the country, honestly, in terms of like engaged voters, the white men tend to be on that side because, again, law of large numbers and where they're setting out in aggregate. But again, I do not believe that this is something that is necessarily a given, especially amongst poor working class, which there are more than ever.
In addition, if I may, there is a very palpable, I think it's fair to call it an injustice, that a lot of poor young men of all descriptions are very, very sensitive to. And that's that the Andrew Tates and the Jordan Petersons of the world, they offer conciliation as well as an avenue to getting wealthy and successful and actually undoing the personal harms, or the ones that they can detect at least, wrought upon them by current situations, through their own efforts, or living with the failure, right?
I'm hesitant to say that because to me, a lot of that alienation and a lot of that personal harm is specifically taught because we're talking about people who grew up in a position where they learn that everything is a meritocracy.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's what they're sensitive to, because what they're sensitive to is conditioned, and whether or not that's like
right.
Yeah. Whereas by contrast, you look at what the left has to offer in that same vein. You have similarly wealthy people, significantly less so in some cases, but you have like Hassan Pikers, you have Voshes, maybe even if your resolution's low enough, you have it like a Destiny or whatever. And they aren't offering you a way out. They aren't offering you a way to feel satisfied with a failing struggle, and they aren't offering you a way to become as successful and wealthy and secure as they are. They literally offer you generally nothing but the comfort of being a part of a large amorphous blob that is rah-rahing the person who directly gets to benefit from all that stuff. And so, like, if you find yourself for whatever reason having any kind of friction on political levels or on social levels, or you start becoming like, you know, you were raised poor, you didn't go to university, you had conservative parents because most poor people are conservative, and for whatever reason, and you find yourself in frictive relationships with all of the people in these leftist spheres, and they aren't treating you fairly. Because, as you're pointing out, you didn't have a choice for these things to seem obvious to you. They seem obvious to you, at least at that stage, as a consequence of the stuff that you have perchance been exposed to. I'm where I am because of a long series of really fortuitous encounters that I don't think almost anybody gets, certainly not from my background. And like I can see very easily myself like remaining like a staunchly conservative person had I not had a few chance encounters over the course of the past 4 years. Like, it's nothing. I have to not say that because YouTube is punishing channels now for that. Yeah, so like I agree with you.
To me, this is the underlying, like, because honestly, the discourse about the discourse about the discourse I could give a shit about. I fucking hate social media, and I think the vast majority of it is, and I will say again, what you're talking about with Hassan and Vosh, and I would say to a large part, most of these communities, is we're talking about reactionaries. And I don't mean reactionaries in terms of right wing. That's not the same thing. Reactionaries react to power. Revolutionaries change it. And that's the difference. What is the power that's being led? And this is, again, what the actual right wing is doing. And it is absolutely almost terrifying when you look at the last 10 years, ever since Bannon sort of began his project, and he's been moving through this, and a lot of people have been playing into it. It is to try to make the right, and they've used the term alt-right, but that didn't come out of nowhere, to make it the new punk rock. to make it so it is the thing that is, we're going to usurp power. And across the board, their messaging is about taking over, resetting the system, destroying the system, changing things, making things better, to the point where you get hilarious notes like Tim Pool as a right-wing asshole getting cheers when he says things like, the communists, yeah, they don't want you to have the labor you work for, the result of your labor. And it's like, fuck me, that's straight up communism. You're saying, like, they've just reversed everything. And this challenge that they're making is utilizing that revolutionary energy for reactionary ends. And sort of the weird fucked up thing that the left has done is we're using revolutionary language for reactionary ends, or the opposite, reactionary language for sort of revolutionary ends. We're both broken. Both sides are fucked. And what we need to do is we need to figure out how to sort of get back to that base. Stop with the reactionary shit. Figure out how to get back to doing stuff like what Eugene Debs did and how he wrote and how he made things not just absolutely something that is digestible, but fucking powerful for people. And the ability for us to start putting out, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be a big movement. They didn't have what we have now in terms of communication platforms and all that. They didn't have the challenges we have, but it doesn't have to be a top-down movement. We don't need billionaires. We have people, and the things that people are reacting to underneath it, we can start changing language and moving with stuff. I think there is a larger project here. Again, you and I have had this conversation. There's a lot we could do, but it's not about aiming at the 17 or the 22-year-old or the 30-year-old proud boy and going, how do we reach that guy? Like, fuck that guy. A lot of these people, it's going to be lost. It's tough. But instead, how do we systemically shift everything and shift the conversation? So Jordan Peterson says, clean up your room. And it's like, we laugh instead of just laughing at him and making fun of him for being an addict or whatever horrifying sort of response. Have a one-to-one actually, no, don't clean your room, clean out your room. Change everything. Get rid of everything you've got. The making an inversion, playing with it. These kinds of responses hit people in a different way, hit messaging in a different way, become a way for us to push forward the messaging. And that's where I keep going back to, because it gets lost in this sort of, well, are we talking about men and are we going to, it's like, fuck. We have so much work to do as a general platform, and watching like Demon Mama go, hey, the environment's ending. It's like, cool. What are we doing? Like, we're not doing anything to fix that. Oh, we're going to have a transgenocide. But what are we actually doing to fight that? Like, materially? Like, I'm
at the end of the day, once again, we return to who's we.
I'm talking about us, whoever's listening, whoever's gives a shit about this.
No, I understand, but like where I would push back a little bit is that there is a necessary asymmetry between the effort to actually interfere with those sort of passive attitudes that are taking place, and the effect that you're actually sort of going for. Like the Demon Mama, what is she doing? Well, she's making a YouTube video addressing exactly the same conversation that she is saying is a waste of time. Seems contradictory and sort of circular, but at the same time, if that reorients things a little way, it might actually, cause that energy to siphon off somewhere else. And I think what's really important here is, like, this is a 20K sub channel. This is only a little bit smaller than, I mean, it's actually kind of hilarious that it's in terms of sub count, it's less than double my size, which is crazy. We don't have the power to make interferences outside of that. Like, we really don't. This is the biggest megaphone we have.
Right.
Yeah, but like the retort to that can't be, well, put down your megaphone and do what exactly? You put down the megaphone and you're just one guy with a cell phone. It's not a whole lot of power there.
I'm just going to say,
yeah,
yes, most leftist movements throughout history were that. Like, it's not like I'm just trying to like.
Yeah.
It's not like the major leftist revolutions like had some big moneyed interest backing them up in a hyper hierarchy ready to go. Like they may have developed into that, but Mao, what like these people didn't come out of like the mill of revolutionaries and
No, but
you know,
it helped that China was being attacked by Japan, and helped that Germany was
it helped in Russia, and it helped
backing Lenin.
in the major movements in multiple European countries, the South America in general. What happened in Chile? Chile had an amazing push towards the left. There's a lot of countries where this happened because of a handful of people. Lula is back in power in Brazil. That's against the moneyed interest, if you want to be very frank about it. Like there is some really cool shit that happens, and it is a dude, it is a woman, it is a person. These writings, I sent you a Shulamith Firestone. That's not a person who came out of like a really moneyed history of talking and writing. That movements come out of singular people. I would say, just as a thing, is maybe not, shitting on each other at every turn and taking snipes. That is literally what this is. This is, hey, we're just going to have discourse about discourse and bitch about discourse and that. Instead, it's, hey, I disagree with them. Let me move on. Unless the take is like genuinely atrocious, Mr. Girl level shit, where it's like, hey, people have disagreements. Move forward. That's what you have to do. And we just charge.
Well, I think that's sort of what Dean Mom's actually getting at here. But I think we legitimately do have a sort of paradox we have to work through, where online we rally attention by means of precisely those discourses that are also antithetical to actual action farther down the line. So how do you solve that? Because we need to...
Say that one more time for me. Sorry, that was real quick for...
No, it's okay. So the way in which a left-wing voice with a noble purpose, let's say, maybe the most productive one possible, gets to a position where they can start speaking in such a way as there's maybe like something in the ballpark of efficacy towards helping to nudge something small somewhere else, is by engaging in precisely the kind of discourse that arrests the imagined potential action of the left, quote unquote, as a whole. So the question I have is, do we bite the bullet and just we assume, no, the left isn't losing, the left is a non-entity. What we have are a bunch of content creators using the left as a branding tactic. And a bunch of
So let me just say, content creators on YouTube are not the left.
I agree.
Okay, the people who are doing real world actual activism in person, hitting the ground, door knocking, doing labor work, driving and getting petitions for farmers, working to get Starbucks unionized. This is actual movements towards the left. Content creators who are making content that can be digested broadly by people who are able to write at that level. There is something more there. YouTube is literally an echo chamber, and it's really difficult to have people cross over. So I'm not aiming at YouTube. I'm talking about in general.
But people don't read pamphlets. They watch videos now. They read tweets.
Well, then, and how they get to where they're at, and this is again to come back to the point originally that it's one of the good ones that Vosh made is we know absolutely that there is a right wing pipeline. It starts with the Joe Rogans and heads down flatly, right? Yeah. Very simple. We know it, and it goes boop 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 boom, and we can probably name the points. So why hasn't someone, or why hasn't there been an effort to sort of find and coalesce around a Joe Rogan-esque person on the semi-left, or someone who can start building that pipeline or building those types of content? Because again,
I'll tell you exactly why. Because there has been. There's people like Vosh, and what we find is when we coalesce around people like Vosh, they grow and they become, as you say, reactionary in the softer sense. They become
right, because the nature of the beast.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that's like I mean it's even in a sense a reflection of what Vosh himself was suggesting with respect to like the left has just allowed has just ceded this ground of self-help for young men. Do you know where the three arrows logo comes from, right?
No.
No, that was an attempt by the Social Democrats in Weimar Germany to compete with the Nazis. It was an attempt to adopt their new and technological and pithy and bombastic,
Edgy.
and simplified form of propaganda. Yeah, that too, but simplified form of propaganda. And they did everything right, but they lost because they were late. And what I'm seriously wondering here is, like, is this actually a tractable problem, or is this something more akin to a permanent feature of the terrain that we need to be more guileful about how we respond to it? Or need to be more guileful in how we respond to it, rather, is more.
It's a very fair point. I would lean towards there being the ability for us to continually, and when I say us, I mean at large people who have sort of a trend towards that sort of revolutionary side from, if you're in the WTO riots back in Seattle 20 years ago, because you're old like I am, all the way through like Occupy Wall Street on one end, or yeah, sure, fuck it, YouTubers or whatever, that there is an ability to continually be playing with subverting systemic mores and rules that push it. I would mention, for example, Channel 5 and Andrew Callahan. One of the really interesting things about Andrew and how he's gone to talk about sort of the pipeline of a content creator who I think ostensibly was a more leftist project, and in my opinion, has shifted to being more central lib, especially with the documentary he just released. That sort of push of the subversion, the just showing what things are and not the playing with it in the traditional way, and having a new type of media show up that then spawned a whole bunch of others, especially during a time of, BLM and being locked in and people driving around, like that kind of thing, I think shifted and changed conversations. At some point, and this is the difficulty we run into, is the nature of capital is to subsume anything that gets made, like period, and find a great way to do it. Che Guevara being on Gap t-shirts is sort of the penultimate example that sort of pulls out of that. But the ability to continually be subverting and playing with that as we move and as we do stuff, I think it is the thing that is absolutely unique on the left. The right doesn't have, as much as they want to be punk rock, their subversions are not subversions. They're sort of superversions, if there is such thing, where it's like they take the system to an extreme and they act like they're being subversive. They're not. But instead, the people who, I think of, content creators who are going deeply far out of their way, sort of in the sort of extreme views of art or music or, even avant-garde sort of performance art, or how they're sort of interacting. There's ways to be subversive that naturally push people in different directions and sort of touch them in a different way. Again, getting back to sort of traditional content as a thing. This is one of those things that the left has the ability to, and it has the ability to do these things, I think, uniquely, that the right simply doesn't. The right doesn't have, for example, facts on its side as much as they play that. You get someone like Cody Shoddy, the Some More News, which is wonderful and goes through, I think, point by point and just breaks things down in a really wonderful way with a wonderful narrative. This is the kind of stuff that the right simply doesn't have the ability to do.
However, they don't. Here's the crucial point, though. They don't need to have the ability to do that, because the amount of work it takes to do what Cody Shoddy is doing is monumentally more than what some new moneyed ragamuffin who wants to start a right-wing grift has to do, and they already have the numbers. So they have the benefit of a comforting ambience of general approval on their side. So there is not that agitation that causes people to question like prevalent narratives in their spaces, to cause the average person who doesn't really have much investment in that. They're just there for the vibes, so to speak, or for like the therapeutic value of it. There's no impetus for these people to like pay more attention to Cody as opposed to all of these other people who are bluntly far less stressed out, have way more resources behind them, and have the benefit of like just the bare fact of there being 100 anti-vaxxers on YouTube assuages people who are like viewers of that nurse bastard who here, let's see here, hang on, I want to find his name. There's like this guy, this old medical worker who's just like pushing the ivermectin thing. The fact that there are all of these people who appear to have credentials, appear to have respectability, largely the product of themselves being wealthy as a result of their grift, selling a consistent message amongst themselves and not infighting, that gives the average viewer the confidence that, hey, look, I don't know for certain, but I know all of these guys who seem very successful seem to know for certain, and that's enough for me to license myself to not look further into this. You see the problem. Like, we lack a critical resource, and we will always lack a critical resource that the right has, and that's time. It kills us at a very real and physical level to keep up with that.
Then it would be worth absolutely going back and looking through the successful leftist movements, and there have been some even in this country. And I would say the labor movement, Eugene Debs, I keep going back to, and I'm going to continue to. These are people who very uniquely made their way into public space, very much in a time of hard conservatism, much different than we have now. Did well. How did these leftist movements come to be? Because it's not like these challenges are new. Some of them are, the shape of them are. The machine that we're in, I think, is unique, and I think it's worth sort of thinking through how that's set up and ways to sort of subvert that. But again, what you're describing is not a unique to this time thing. Is it?
It might be a little bit. The nature of the speed at which all this takes place, the way in which information is dispersed and processed, that's certainly new. The kinds of industries that people find themselves in when they become agitated enough to become politically awakened, that's changed. Like, when we talk about the poor, we aren't talking about factory workers, we're talking about service workers.
True.
When we're talking about the rich, we aren't talking necessarily about old money or capitalists or like the bourgeoisie. We may be talking about people who just got lucky with a camera on the internet. Like there are the upper classes are like not the upper classes like in the real sense, but like there are people with orders of magnitude more wealth than I have. Well, there are lots of people with orders of magnitude more wealth than I have, but there are people with orders of magnitude more wealth than Vosh has, who literally just had to get undressed on the internet. Like it's not the same world. And frankly, power to them. I don't resent it, but it's like we don't have that same unity of interest that used to exist along class and monetary lines that we did when we weren't first identified along purely informational lines. Like the speed at which propaganda gets to us is just too fast, and it gets us too early. And the main culprit isn't the right wing, really. It's the
information systems that are built and how they're built.
Well, that's the mechanistic cause. But if we're looking for like an agential cause, it's going to be the soft liberal, soft conservative, because they're really the same thing, soft conservative hum of telling us what the actual baseline is, what is the normal that is being pumped into our heads from the first moment we are allowed by our parents to watch a television. And the right gets us first because they offer the crude and immature critique of all the things that slowly
unfold. No, and it's bled in.
Yeah,
my son's 5, and I have to like literally watch like 9 or 10 episodes of every cartoon now because Arthur. I grew up with Arthur. I'm an old person, but like there are with
so
Arthur
getting him started on Steven Crowder when you're young.
Yeah. But it's Arthur I grew up with, but like anything I grew up with, inevitably, and even in the last 10 or 15 years, cartoons had boys and girls are different and they don't get along, and the best way for them to get along is just to understand that they're different. And I'm like, that's not a fucking thing. I'm like, what the fuck? And that reality you're talking about is that these messages are baked and built in, and there are millions of them. There's more content now than there ever has been in the history of anything that we'll never be able to digest. We end up in a position where I think you have a very fair point that it is, if there is a tilting at windmills thing, it is shooting BBs at a train. If we're going to go ahead and try to build, any semblance of leftist media or critique against the deluge of absolutely neoliberal or right-wing everything, top 10 films of all time that everyone has to see, that, Avatar 2 is now climbing up. They're all neoliberal, hyper-normative fantasy stories about white men or protecting the status quo, because superhero movies are protecting the status quo. They're all these really, really hyper-normative things that teach pretty horrific lessons. And those are just the biggest films. Take whatever Netflix releases week on week on week that isn't some true crime nightmare that naturally pushes, again, people towards the more right of things, and shows that world. And it's a very fair point. The content is worse than it's ever been, and it's almost, it's a deluge that is maybe too much.
I'm going to run to the washroom quickly. Let's continue this in 5 seconds. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm going to use the restroom too.
All right, cool. I'm going to pop the card on. You will still be audible, so just be warned.
I'm muting.
Oh, Brooks is back. Okay, there we go.
Oh yeah, no, I've just been waiting. Figured I'd let you eat and have your snack.
I am enjoying it. Thank you. Costco croissants are so bad for you, but they're so good. Yeah. So, where did we leave off?
We left off on the nature of media as a thing. There's a deluge of it. It tends to form. Also, the mechanics underneath it, but the content itself forms and tends to form towards reactionary. How it wouldn't even be possible to begin a Debs-like push of leftism inside of a handful of papers. We certainly don't have the reach he did, where every iron worker, international workers of the world would pick up and read because they had only 2 or 3 pieces of content they could choose from newspaper-wise, and one of them, boom, socialist newspaper. They would grab that because it was in their best interest. We don't have that. We barely have that when it comes to Twitter or social media or anything. So we're fucked. Is that where we left off?
Let's assume that we weren't. What would we do?
Well, so if we do rewind and we look back at, I'm going to go back to Debs because again, the socialist movement in the U.S. in the early 1900s was, I would say, a success.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to do that, we were to take a look at that time, we would say that he sort of built and shifted from his start, and I have to go like super deep into like his biography to sort of get at this. But if we look at the structures he was playing with, how did he, and again, I believe subversion is the core of a lot of these things, how did he subvert or counter-actualize the elements of the right as they came to being crystallized? Where did he find that endpoint that he could jump in and he could play with workers? Now, again, you're right in the sense that the industrial, brutal working conditions that we don't have in this country at the same level. The vast majority of people are in service industries of one sort or another. Doesn't lend itself because, working at Starbucks it's not a shit job. Like, it's not the best job in the world, but it's no coal mine position where your friend's dying in your arms from a heart attack kind of thing.
I think moreover, the way in which workers become fungible to an unprecedented degree. Because here's the thing, right? Like, a coal miner is replaceable, very easily so. But an experienced coal miner is a different loss than an experienced Starbucks worker.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah, George who has been working in the mine. Yeah, George has been working in the mine for 10 years and like is the leader and guide of every other young man who's working in the mine. Him disappearing is a different deal than like, oh, that supervisor we all like, they're transferring to another store. Like, there's a different level of community there.
Yeah, I mean, you're now talking about lumpen versus proletariat. Like, this is that kind of push where it's we now have absolutely fungible workers. Someone who has worked at Starbucks can be fired, replaced within a day. Someone else can sort of take their spot. We have a checkout system and a idiot-proof sort of building of coffee that is just do X, do Y, do Z, done. And soon it's going to be button, 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 and soon it's going to be automated. And as this happens, what is the end for us? What is the place where we can attach ourselves? Where is the thing that as a movement we can start making inroads towards changing stuff? I don't know if I see it necessarily. You're making a very fair point. And again, I think underneath it, I think we're saying the same things. And this is my critique of what Vosh is saying and what I think the general discourse is. People are deeply fascinated with this discourse, but this isn't about how are we going to reach out to young men. That's if someone wants to make a couple bucks, there's probably a really good way to go and do that and be like a semi-leftist sort of answer to Jordan Peterson. I think there's room for that. I think Vosh is right. But I think you'd end up going reactionary. And I think a lot of the stuff you do would end up bending towards the way the system works. Because again, that's how all of this is built. So that's not the goal. My question is, what is the systemic change? How can we plant those seeds that maybe today won't take root, but that we can start seeing grow and start building?
It's a good question. It's actually,
That's
I don't know. Well, I get like just to somewhat consonant with Demon Mama's point. She's just advising people to just like, actually take care of themselves, and not expend energy, and kill themselves bodily by like fighting people on whether or not Vosh is ceding whatever territory to the right by having like this off the cuff response in a Twitter engagement. I think there's a general failure amongst the demographic. I'm not entirely particularly sure like where the lines are drawn here. But I noticed this also like in the debate I had with Synth a little while ago. You see it a lot in the vegan community. I see it in leftist spaces generally. If you don't have there's an unwillingness or an inability to like just internalize an obvious fact, right? If you have not managed to accrue any power, then you have no power. And what Robert Michel is pointing at, with concepts derivative from this iron law of oligarchy, is not just that, oh look, all the lefties are corrupt. It's that like this is how the dynamics actually play out. You have to work with this. And for instance, there's a lot of resentment about people like Hassan and Vosh, at this scale at least, being the largest voices that we have. I don't even really count people like ContraPoints and Philosophy Tube and H-Bomber Guy as anything other than just entertainers. I really probably shouldn't even regard the aforementioned as anything more than entertainers generally, although they do actually engage in conversations. If there are people with that kind of reach who are entertaining your positions, and you don't have alternatives, I don't know. I don't know what the plan is for most of these people, because they're still playing the same
let's
game.
also take a second, because
Yeah.
as much as I will say, I'm not going to disagree that Hassan and Vosh are significant figures. Are they bigger? Like when we're talking about the grand scheme of like actual
Yes.
impact on things, are they anything? Are they, because they are the answer to the Jordan, like they're our version online of the Jordan Petersons, the Crowders, the Ben Shapiro's.
Yes.
And I would argue that's embarrassing in its own way, because I don't know anyone, I don't know even who's not online terminally, who everyone knows Ben Shapiro as a name. No one's ever heard of either of the other people I've mentioned. Like, they would be like, who? And so are we even talking about the same game at that point? Or are we sort of going, hey, we're like up at bat, like when Pee Wee baseball and they're playing, the pros.
Engagement from Ben Shapiro to Vosh is like engagement from Hassan Piker to me.
Yeah.
It's a different universe. The question though is that a universe we exist in already? Because it's possible, I don't know if it's true, but it's possible that in terms of the propaganda war, because it's been divorced from the material war for the time being, is that what it takes to get in? And if that is, then you need to start like treating these people as material, not as competitors, because if that's the best you got, like you need the thin end of the wedge somewhere, if that's the game you're going to try to play. And I don't see people trying to play another game, really. I see a whole lot of people like complaining about, oh, there's so many like leftists online, why don't they get out and organize? Well, it's like one of those classic game theory problems. Like, okay, so one person decides to do that.
Let's Hillary Clinton did a thing with Contra on her series, not on Contra's series. Like, Hillary gave Contra a major platform. And to your point, so if it's Contra, it's God, I'd be hard pressed to even say at that point. Like Hassan and Vosh, some point, I would say TYT network is even more. But this is all still terminally online people. This isn't like Netflix streamers who now Contra is probably the closest that comes. People who are like liberal now are aware of Contra, not aware of anyone else. That we're now talking about this sort of really weird. Let's. I want to take a step back and talk about an assumption. Does online matter? Like, and how? How does it matter? I suppose I should say.
We don't know.
How does online matter?
We don't know. There are people who conjecture that the outcomes of the last two elections, the major ones, the presidential elections, were largely the result of an online media game.
I would bet that. I actually think that's probably true.
Well, I mean, that's
all the studies seem to be pointing that it's Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups and all this shit that drove the first Trump election for sure.
That's pretty damn big. Like take me for example, right? I've got a political science channel. I get most of my news through Twitter and through these guys because there's not enough time in a day. Like there's just not enough time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have time to read the news generally. I try.
Well, there's too much content. How are you even going to filter? You pick one or two
exactly,
channels
and moreover, there's so much bleed over. Because like you read about January 6th taking place. Well, it just so happens there's fucking cozy and YouTube people who are directly involved in some of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's too much.
So the question would be how?
How are they getting involved in that?
How does online matter? Because it's clear it does. So then the question is how? Because let me say a statement and the reason I'm bringing it up. Vosh gets a bunch of views. Hassan is one of the biggest Twitch streamers. That, I am uncertain, yields anything in and of itself. Like each of those things, I don't even know if they drive anything. And I would wonder, in general, if there is a such thing as a single content creator that does drive, or that it is literally, as I think the theoreticians and the people who've talked about how the internet works for 30, 40 years, it is all about the network effect. And it is about the growth of it and the bouncing off of these ideas that go through each other. That there is people get in line on the right. Steven Crowder will make the same point that Ben Shapiro will make, that we'll see Jordan Peterson make, that Libs of TikTok will make, that Tucker Carlson will make. There is, even if it's not, and I don't think it is, like from on high, these messages come down. I think they have a fairly decentralized sort of view of how they do that, at least as far as people can tell. But that network effect is actually what does this, because it isn't so much that all of those people who voted for Trump were subscribed to any one viewer. They weren't like all Ben Shapiro fans. Right. I think that's actually probably not who they were fans of.
Probably not, yeah.
But instead, what they are is they're sort of making their way through this large network effect that bleeds ideas down from the large sort of mass, wherever they come from. They make their way into this mass through the Joe Rogans and through the lighter touch stuff. And then they end up in Facebook groups, which if you aren't, you should make a fake Facebook account and join a bunch of conservative groups and see how they share this and how they network and why they do it. To your point, they do it because of capital. I have a fake Facebook account that has joined a bunch of these groups because I find it fascinating. But they're all selling shit. They're all selling merch. They're all selling supplements. They're cash. But we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in these groups, and they post and they say the most awful rank shit, but they're repeating these talking points that bubble up and then bubble back down. And this sort of setup is what the internet is best at, the network effect of a thing. And so if this is where the internet gets its power, and this is where the alt-right really works, it's not about any single viewer, it is about the network effect. Is there a way we can strengthen bonds or connections or how we do messaging or how we have discussions that actually can reinforce, at least in some way, and strengthen a position? I'm not sure if it's necessarily that their method is positive. I'm just saying their way is clearly effective. And if we don't have an answer for that, I'm hesitant to just accept ceding ground. I'm very hesitant to just say, okay, cool, I'm off to go write my book and study philosophy, and you guys have fun with your theory.
I'll tell you what the problem is. It just occurred to me. Well, I mean, it didn't just occur to me, but as a consequence of finding themselves being hyper scrutinized through social media and not having access to mainstream platforms, the right has gained an unanticipated advantage in that it erroneously regards social media as the primary battlefield that it needs to succeed at, which means that there is a unity of purpose and target among the right wing generally that the left wing lacks. The left wing is indecisive and sort of diffuse in what it's doing. There are people on the left, a large number of them, who spend their lives only doing offline stuff. There are a large number who spend their lives only doing online stuff. And they're all fighting each other, and they're often using that dispersion to fight each other. The right, even though they're fairly unsophisticated and not particularly good at it, the bare fact of them all trying at it de facto commits them all to a similar strategy. There is some unity of practice on the right wing. There isn't really so on the left wing. The left has a lot of viewers of a few left-wing content creators. The left doesn't have a lot of like culture warriors in that sphere, not really. And the tendency is, at least judging from what I've seen, is not to engage nearly as aggressively and to allow unproductive, quote unquote, conversations be. More often than to like dig in your heels and like wear down the opposition and therefore cement your presence as a group. In a sense, maybe the left is too smart for its own good. It has too many like seemingly more viable options that it arrests them from really committing to one desperate last ditch attempt. And like the right doesn't have just really like one singular avenue by which to attack their goals politically, but they think there is, or at the very least the average person thinks there is. So every single person who's having a debate online, this is like a life and death crusade of cosmic proportions from their vantage. They're the last knight standing. With the left, you don't have that. You have a whole bunch of really often very intelligent but very confused and displaced people with no leadership structure, not even the blind leadership structure of like a common kind of goal, much less a common goal. And as a consequence, by and large, they're more likely to engage negatively with leftists than with rightists, who they'll engage with dismissively. And there's no capacity to actually grow involvement in a singular plan such that any plan has a hope in hell of succeeding. It really is just channels that succeed, or platforms that succeed, or some book sells well, or some person gets some exposure. But there hasn't been like an effective way to actually utilize the little person, or cause the little person to self-utilize themselves, such that there's any competition on that base populist dimension.
One of the other challenges is, at least in my experience, and I think it's generally true of sort of, the right reactionary politics, because they tend to be very intuitively based, emotionally based, that their arguments aren't based in any singular theory. You don't run into a lot of people on the right who would even say such a thing. Whereas, if I start talking about, my reading of Das Kapital versus someone, I've actually had this happen in discussions on your channel, versus someone who's a little bit more orthodox, the ability for us to have that conversation disappears very quickly. And because we have a disagreement about how we read a thing, and there are some significant outcomes versus how one might see it versus another. That kind of setup, I think, puts us in a really unique position versus the right as well, who they don't have theory, they don't give a shit. It's literally like emotional responses here, there, or the other, often.
Yeah. Yeah, and we just don't have the tools to do that. And I think crucially too, one strategy that the left has taken just in the media space to make themselves visible and to compete with a much better backed and comfortable and cozy right-wing equivalent is they have really leaned into the shock and sort of like the punk angle of things, and to make themselves aggressively unpalatable even. And I mean like a basic level. Like, for people in this audience, this probably seems silly, but the bare fact that Demon Mama is called Demon Mama and has like a satanic theme, that by itself, there are whole communities, people are going to be talking about how, oh, look at this degeneracy. She's worshiping Satan. Look what leftism does to you. Look at how like perverse these people's values are.
I think I'm hesitant. Again, there's some level of that, but I think the vast majority of people who come to a conservative space, I think there is if it's their religious fervor, whatever it may be, I think that's, again, someone who would go, oh, see, we're not going to get them anyway, fuck them. But it's a tiny percentage of any population who would do that. The perverse or the other things that, again, these are small percentages. We know this because we have polls to back up where people actually have sentiment, abortion rights, premarital sex, contraception. All of these things are overwhelmingly, we're talking about like 80+% popular, even in the States. So it's not even about reaching out to the people who are like way out there, but instead, like, how do we have any semblance of a connective network effect of any sort, or if it's even possible, which as we're talking, I'm becoming less and less of a believer in, as I say this every moment, but hey, we're chasing down ideas.
Ooh, that's a cool painting. Sorry, I'm browsing Twitter as we speak.
Excellent. But it's again, social media as a thing. It's difficult for people to sort of have that chance to sort of step outside of where they're actually at. It's a very ego-based, soul unit, singular person-based thing. I am this. I am what I'm putting out in the world. Every post is my identity. As such, it leans towards a deeply reactionary sort of stance. Just in general, it's tough to be anything but. So again, I would even proffer that the machines are naturally built against this from the beginning.
Yeah. It's hard to disagree with that. Trying to think. So there's an intrinsic disconnect between like somebody in my position, who's like doing I mean, like, it's a left-wing channel, but it's also a political science channel. I also deal with other stuff, so it's like, I don't know, what even is this? But resuming, I identify first and foremost as like a left-wing activist channel, which I really do not.
I would say leftist theory channel.
Leftist, sure. There is a disconnect between what I do to sustain my channel and the left as a category, because I don't engage with the left when I make content. That is just consumed by God knows who. Same with same ultimately with Demon Mama, same with Vosh, same with Three Arrows, Cuck Philosophy, Hakeem, whatever. And moreover, I just don't know. As you say, it seems like there is a strong impact of social media and engagement on that politically. Um, here's what's unique about our current situation. Okay, that same logic that tends even socialist and left wing parties to behave in a very conservative manner, and even to give up the overall goal for the sake of maintaining itself as it is currently operating to the benefit of whoever is benefiting at the time. That same logic is being onboarded by individuals with private Twitter accounts and nothing but hopes and dreams of one day being famous. I don't know how you overcome that. Like it's actually insane. It really is like a unique situation, and I wonder if like the temptation to go down an accelerationist line of thinking is real. Like it's there.
Yeah. I mean, yes,
But that
of
seems like admitting failure anyway. So I almost don't see the point.
well, accelerationism by nature is sort of saying I don't give a shit about anyone except people in power. I'm
Yeah.
not super big fan of accelerationism as a thing in general,
Yeah.
to say the least. So we'll sidestep that convo
Same.
for right now.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately another reactionary stance. It's reacting to power versus seizing it, versus changing how the system works. It's the desire to be in control, or hoping that you get to, that the system gets destroyed enough that maybe you get your turn, which I'm also not a fan of. So I'm
Well, that's the logic that put the Nazis in power. It doesn't work. It's like, yeah, technically if you blow up the board, there's a chance for the side that you want to win that was hopelessly losing before to get a leg up. But that applies to everybody else. And maybe it'll just get reshuffled such that, oh no, the party that was hegemonic before, they're even stronger now. Because now all of their little impediments, those are blown up too. So it's like that's how the Nazis became an alarming democratic force briefly before they began their decline with the reversal of the Great Depression. Conservatives in power thought, hey, we'll run an election, and we'll allow all the parties to be reshuffled, and all of these gains, they'll lose them. Other parties will have a chance. They've had time to make mistakes and to fail. And they ran elections, and who succeeded? It wasn't the nationalist parties, wasn't the centrist parties, it was the extreme communists and the Nazis. Accelerationism is literally just gambling, and like maybe you'll hit a jackpot, who knows? But I don't know how on earth you would say that, hey, if we just accelerate the situation to its worst extreme as quickly as possible, or just I'll permit it to unimpeded, that therefore we'll all just see the light and we'll be inoculated against like toxic political pundits or whatever. Like, we don't know, first of all, like what new ones will be generated by that, and secondly, on what basis do we think that we would be so rational as to do that? And moreover, at that point, might it not be too late anyways? So it's silly, or it's presumptuous at least. All right, I have to get through the rest of this video.
Yeah, go for it. Do you want me to hang out, or do you care?
Be my guest. Let me see if I can't succeed at sharing the audio this time. I know it's
magic if you can.
It's a futile gesture, but fingers crossed.
Just as a note, one of the things about accelerationism I always have to say is the people tend to push back and they go, "Oh yeah, it's Nick Land credits Deleuze. A lot of people credit Deleuze for being this really accelerationist thinker, and literally he has the line that says, 'Nothing dies of its own contradictions.' He doesn't. The The systems don't collapse like that. That's not how it works. The accelerationism would just yield more inequality and pain and suffering.
That is
That's
it.
all it is. You're not sharing any audio with me.
Am I not really?
No.
I hope you understand that. Not only that, I want to talk
Give
about
him
one
his
other.
lovely face.
You're not hearing anything.
Mm-mm.
There's no chance in hell that's not like a your end kind of thing, right?
0 chance. I mean, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, that's what's confusing me.
Yeah, no, nothing. It's not on my side for sure.
I wonder if I can make it capture desktop audio. Oh, did I just close? I just closed Discord. Oh my god. Everyone stay calm. We'll get him back.
Good.
Alright, yeah, sorry. I accidentally closed Discord. I meant to hit a different button.
See you.
That's... Okay. Here we go. I might just need to update my audio drivers. I have no idea what's going on.
We'll do this off time. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to yell at you from the text.
Sounds good.
thing.
All right, then I can go lay in bed and fall asleep too. That'd be lovely.
Brilliant.
Because
Yeah,
I
you
touched
enjoy
on this
it.
discourse.
I do think it is worthwhile to spend some time and think through what are the tools and the weapons we have. That's it. It's always about assessing what are the weapons we have available and constantly looking for new ones. That's it. And we just don't. We're using their weapons, and shockingly, we're losing.
Here, I've got. I'll have closed captions on for you, so you can just read.
I'm good. Don't.
No, it's fine. It doesn't cost me anything.
Very briefly at the end of my stream a couple of days ago. At the end of my at the end of the last stream that I did, where we were reacting to stuff and whatever, I touched on it very briefly. And I mentioned that it had become incredibly toxic. And I want you to understand that the level of toxicity is worse than it's ever been, okay? You all, who here remembers the IMP's code, okay? Who here fucking remembers the IMP's code? Does anybody? Because I do. The IMP's code, the rule number 1 of the IMP's code, immediately stop discoursing. That, I have been hawking the IMP's code for over 2 years. It's one of the first memes from my channel was the IMP's code. And the IMP's code was created because Twitter discourse gets so toxic. And this discourse is one of the most toxic I've ever seen in my entire time on Twitter. The toxicity levels were beyond control. And there isn't a single side that is responsible for this. Part of the reason is because there's no sides. No one even knows what the fuck they're talking about. Some people are trying to act as though this is about, some people are talking about this is about self-help. Some people are saying this is about how we should treat individual men. Some people are talking about how this is actually emblematic of the left hating men. Some people are talking about how fascists are winning because the left won't promise men a wife and kids. And some people are talking about all of those things at once without making any distinguishment beside them. Okay, let me make a small illustration. Okay,
distinguishment.
Let's imagine that somebody did you wrong. Okay, somebody did you wrong, and so you wanted to get back at them. You wanted to reply. They were doing you wrong. They were saying something wrong about you. And so you decided to throw a punch, okay? They're accusing you of a crime. They're saying some way across the line shit, and you decide to throw a punch. And you throw that punch, and you actually you throw that punch and you hit somebody else who you perceive to be associated with the first person, because the first person isn't there for you to actually throw a punch at. That right there, that punching somebody else who you think is associated with somebody else, which you think is associated with a certain position, is all that I have been seeing going on Twitter. It is depressing. It's not depressing. It's fucking insulting. You should be ashamed of yourselves. You all should be ashamed of yourselves. And I don't mean to be a bit of a fucking scold about it. I don't mean to fucking scold you all about this, but we have fucking bigger stakes than this right now. We have bigger stakes than trying to relitigate ancient false narratives about whether or not the left is made up of man-hating feminazis, or spending our time propagating misinformation about public figures that we don't feel strongly about. Do you think that anybody cared? All of you, I know that every single person here, because I could see how chat was reacting. I could see how every single person here has been touched by this discourse in one way or another. And it has flooded well beyond Twitter. This isn't just a Twitter thing, although Twitter is certainly where a lot of it unfolded. This has spread to the Discords. I have seen it all over my Discord. I have seen it all over other people's Discords. Okay? I have seen it everywhere. Do you think anybody else besides the most online section of the left gave a shit about that? What do you guys think that all of the Antifa people who were preparing counter protests to the anti-drag psychos, what do you think those guys are looking at and seeing? When those people who are out on the street putting themselves, their bodies, literally, between fascists and innocent queer people, what do you think they look at and see when they see this shit? When they see a bunch of people pettily swinging stupid, edgy insults at each other and spreading misinformation about one another? What do you think that our enemies see? What do you think the people who are currently trying to install a Christian nationalist program for the future, a Christian nationalist program which will necessitate the deaths of every queer person that you know, what do you think they see when they look into that? And what did we gain from it? Did you gain anything? Be honest with yourself. If you're sitting there in chat right now, I've been totally ignoring for this entire time that have been ranting directly into the camera. But those of you in chat, if there's people in chat who think that I'm off base with this, what did you gain? What did you learn? Did you recruit anybody new? Did you have a new friend? Did you get somebody new interested in leftism? You want to know what my experience was? You want to know what my experience was? Was people who are tangentially connected to politics, who occasionally dip their toes in and check out some politics stuff, were turned off. I got messages from people who I know in real life who are saying, man, this shit is so stupid, I'm done. Like, what the fuck is wrong with lefties? Not because the left is, secretly pushing, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Yes, it is. I agree.
Not because the left is secretly.
When Demo Mama says "are we," that's the same "we" and "are" for me. That's whatever that is, because what do you think the theocrats trying to install a Christian theocracy feel about this? They're giddy about it. There is a battle happening actively right now. And there are two sides. So yeah, I lean that way.
Pushing people away from the left because they don't like men, not because they didn't leave the left because they saw a video, an out of context video of Vosh that makes him look bad. They left because they saw the left. They turned away from it because they saw the left and they went, wow, this is just a bunch of children throwing shit at each other and I don't want anything to do with it. Yeah, Gayfish says you literally saw me uninstall Twitter in front of you. Yeah. Eddie says I'm pretty much done with politics too. That's not the answer. The answer is to get fucking serious. The answer is not to turn away from politics. The answer is to refuse to engage in this stupid nonsense. I have many times on this stream talked about how, infighting to a certain degree comes naturally to the left, okay? The reason for this is because the left is a broad collection of generally liberatory ideologies. The left is, to be short, the left is the only faction in the political sphere that truly values independent thought. The right does not. The right is conservative. They believe in old school values, traditionalism, knowing your place, always respecting your elders' opinions because they are old, because they are higher than you on the hierarchy. The left is the side that fosters independent thought. That means there's always going to be infighting on the left. That is natural and it is good. But this is not good. This is not healthy. This is not liberatory. This type of shit is benefiting no one. This is people venting their stress and their trauma on each other instead of turning that against the real enemies. Instead of turning that against the ever-encroaching empire that is trying to choke us all. I should be clear about something. While there are indeed pockets of misandry on the left, there are little Twitter accounts and even some slightly larger Twitter accounts that will say things like, I hate men, you know, men are just blah, 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 whatever. That is a remarkable minority, and it is not hard to fight back against them. Do you want to know what is really hard to fight back against? You want to know what's rampant on the left? You want to know what we've seen on this channel for 2.5 years as I've desperately tried to ever get a chance to fucking speak on a panel? Fucking misogyny. Fucking transphobia. These are things that still are all over the left, especially if you consider liberals to be part of the left. I don't really consider liberals to be strictly part of the left. I think that I consider them to be left of center, but I don't consider them really personally. But I know a lot of people do. You want to talk about how bad misogyny is in leftist spaces, in liberal spaces? Do you want to look at the creator demographics? Do you guys want to look at viewer demographics? You know that there's a reason why there's barely any women who watch politics, right? You guys understand that there's a reason why every single major leftist YouTuber's channel demographics are strongly skewed. Like, I'm talking like 70 to 80% of every leftist content creator's audience is male by as objective analytics as we can possibly get. In what way is a demo being mostly men a bad thing? Are you an idiot? What I'm saying is that if there's anyone being discouraged from engaging in politics online, it is on a numerical level, women. Women are not given a voice, especially trans women. Women are not given a meaningful voice in politics. They are driven away from politics. They are 50% of our population, but they are 30% or less of online politics. They are still treated like shit. They are still harassed to a greater degree. That needs to be fucking taken in scope, okay? I believe very strongly that not only are men welcome on the left, but that their issues need to be taken seriously. However, that does not mean that providing critique to narratives is anti-man. It does not mean that pointing out obvious facts about how patriarchy operates is anti-man. And I will not grant ground on that. especially not with the history that I've had in online left-leaning spaces. Women are treated like fucking shit online, okay? In leftist spaces too. I have personal experience with this. You guys have seen it on video. You've watched it, okay? I am not saying that there are not people on the left who are shitty about men. There absolutely fucking are. It's a type of person I personally have publicly pushed back against many, many times. I have pushed back against it in my private life when I've encountered it. But this is a small group of people, and to act as though there is a, that there is like some kind of pan-leftist conspiracy to drive men to the right, or that the left does not currently address men's issues in any way, is fucking not true at all. It's not true, okay? Not only are there tons and tons of channels working their asses off to provide content that speaks to men, but the content that currently exists is predominantly consumed by men. Right now, currently, objectively, we have the stats for this. Stop wasting time, for the love of God. I don't mean don't play video games. I don't mean don't have fun. I don't mean don't watch, you know, fun little YouTube videos. Stop wasting time. Stop doing things that only result in your own misery and other people's misery. Stop engaging in stupid Twitter battles that are architected by people who do not have your interests at heart, okay? They don't care. The people who start these fucking stupid discourses, they're not leftists. They're not interested in the same world that you're interested in, okay? Get that. Understand that. Grok it. Digest it. Swallow it and fucking let it fuel you. Jesse Friendo with the $10 says, thank you for your consistently great and thoughtful work. Excited to see your channel and audience keep growing. It's going up.
It's a Sunday.
Yeah.
So I have a question, because I actually disagree. Like, I agree, but I disagree with something she said at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small number of people. This refrain, it's one I've heard from a lot of people. It, to me, dismisses the actual experience of what it's like to have, 15 people go after you on Twitter, and then their retweets, and what that actually is like. To say it's a small number, and again, it is a small number. I'm not going to disagree with, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that it is a small number, but to say that, I am a sensitive person. I always have been, and I always will be. I'm not built for social media like a lot of people. I was on your stream with Aiko and you, and talking through something that I think I worded poorly, but I ended up having a handful of people, really a small number of people, personally message and then say some pretty awful things about me in social media.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I am too. The thing is, it felt like a lot, because it does. It just does. I'm not a person who necessarily was born and bred online. So
by the way, chat, if I hear that happening to any of my guests in particular, and I hear names, you're gone. Just be warned. Sorry, as you were saying.
Yeah, I wrote on Twitter. It's one of the reasons I had an older account. My current account's more work focused stuff, but like 3-4 years ago, I mentioned and asked, I said, I finally finished all of Judith Butler's work. Anyone else in the realm of queer theory I should be looking into? Theory Twitter. I'm asking you. It's basically my tweet.
Mm-hmm.
And I had Squirrel Girl and a handful of hardcore communists come after me for using queer theory, because I am not queer. I literally don't know another word that I can use for that. Because literally that's the field of study. But I had to I closed my Twitter. I couldn't handle social media for a few days. The things that were said were horrifying, and it's very difficult because and the things were straight about me being a cis man. It was straight about that. It feels awful. And it feels awful to anyone it happens to. And this is the idea, again, it feels terrible whenever it happens. I've been the target of significant online harassment. You and I have discussed it. 4chan raids, swatted, super fun. None of those are fun. I'm not saying they're fun for anyone, but the idea that you can just say, look, it wasn't a lot of people, get over it, is a very strange sentiment.
Okay, well, how about this? I agree with you, because on the flip side, I am not a sensitive person that way. When I have a ratio of 10 to 2 people who are vitriolically disapproving of something that I've said or something that I haven't said, I have no way to gauge, is this representative of a group that caps out at 10 people who are all hyper vigilant about this kind of thing, or is this just the 0.01% of the million people who are actually who would be at my throat about this if they knew?
Correct.
I don't know.
Yep.
And so pragmatically, I have to make a blind decision all the time, over and over and over again. What do I do? And you can't just do. I see some people repeating ContraPoints in the side chat saying just don't tweet. ContraPoints can afford to not engage on every medium that she has access to. Smaller creators cannot. When we're talking about Twitter, for example, Twitter does not pay dividends by itself, but it's an unknown quantity. We don't know what role that plays. We just don't know. All we do know is we need more to be effective. We need more in many cases just to subsist, and we don't have enough. And there is an avenue here. You're going to avail yourself of everything that you can. ContraPoints is somebody who can disappear and not make a video for a year and still whinge about lefties being envious of the rich because some people online were unpleasant to her personally. It's not a small number of people is the point here. And for people who are not cushioned to such an extent from making serious tactical blunders, it is not obvious that you can just be passive in the wake of what seems to you like very possibly representation by a very large number of people, indicating that you're on the way out if you don't play your cards really carefully. So it's massively stressful. It's like you have a whole bunch of ordinary people with no power and no standing suddenly having put upon them the stress of a career politician. It's insane. It's actually insane. I think the point she was making was good though, and that's that to a general audience and even to content creators generally who are small, it behooves you to treat it as if it's irrelevant. First of all, because we have seen from the example of very large creators that it doesn't actually matter all that much. You can have the critical, vicious disapproval of a million people. They will worship success and power in the end anyways, whether it belongs to you or not, but also if it belongs to you. And so really all that matters is that you stay in somehow. And you will be endlessly forgiven. If Richard Spencer can continue a media career, you can. If Shoe on Head can have a continuing media career after the blunders she's made, you can. Andrew Tate, when Andrew Tate gets out of prison, he's going to have a lucrative YouTube career. It's just how it is, or whatever the hell.
Well, and it depends on how you're coming at it. For me, I take it really personally when people think I'm coming after them, or a handful of the comments last time, for example, were that I'm reactionary and going after trans people, and I really, I take it personally in the sense that I really am genuinely sad if I've made someone else feel like I've attacked them. I really, it just gets to me. I'm a oversensitive fuck sometimes. It happens. But even then, again, we're talking about what it feels like, what the emotion of it is, what the experience of these things are. And to say and just turn around, and it's a very strange sort of I don't know. There's a reason I don't fit well in a lot of sort of left-wing politics, because ultimately the uh, the prescription for me always comes back to sort of the same setup, which is understanding that these things are lenses meant to be looked at people, that identity of this sort is how we're categorized and how we're placed, and that it needs to be a lens of awareness for our place as well as others in the world, but it is not who we are. We are nothing. We are a mass of experience. And I don't know. I find it at any time we start getting into a point where you're going to say things like one person, it's not a lot of people doing it. Well, is it ever a lot of people? Like what is this sort of setup that is this grand scale, massive pain that people are feeling? Is there a threshold that we allow it to become something that is, oh, that's enough people? Yes, you get to actually be upset about this and it's a problem, versus others that's not, because you're not a large enough creator. Like, again, social media being what it is and how sort of we experience it in mass and all at once it's very difficult to pull apart and say any of those things.
Yeah. How long have we been going for? We're at, oh god, we're at 3 hours. I think we'll just call it here for tonight. I need to sleep. We have a long vegan stream on Sunday, and tomorrow we're going to be going over some vegan reasonings, I guess.
Whatever happened to the feminist one? I wanted to go over
Oh, the big artist one?
Shulamith. Yeah, I wanted to go over Shulamith Firestone, and we never got a chance to do that.
Oh, I'll reorganize some things.
No, it's fine if it never happens.
I want it to happen. It's just that Truth and State thing aged me by like 5 years. Just the amount of work I had to
start. By the way, it was quite good.
Thank you.
I had to go back and reread parts of, because that's not a book I pick up often. Shockingly, I know, but I appreciated it. It was nice.
Well, I appreciate that. Nearly killed me, so I'm glad that's over.
I have no doubt.
But finally, like, I'm able to, like, move forward with the stuff that's been piling up in the background of that. Just having that hanging over me was just incredibly stressful, but that's done now. So I can actually start scheduling getting back to, like, regular streams. The reason why I haven't been streaming super regularly for the last week or so is just because, like, it actually, like, the last month did a serious number on me, like, just at a medical level. So I'm going to have to actually, like, really seriously, like, just address my problem with overworking myself into an early grave going forward, because, like, I'm at a point where I physically can't keep up with the kind of tasks that I've set for myself. Like, it was unrealistic.
I have offered to do Saturday streams with you where I read and you just talk very little. But
yes, you have, and we actually had people in the chat asking about when we're going to resume that. And I think we should resume that soon. It's been. I'll explain to you later, but it's been.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You don't like to lose. I get it, dude. Cool.
I love to lose. I was actually really enjoying that. Well, tomorrow I'm prepping for the thing, but let's resume.
No, do the veganism thing. I mean, I'm going to be sending you another book here too. I think I mentioned it to you. It's Tara Abados's. It's a title I can't pronounce out loud. Hands down, the best book on sort of racial identity and politics in a Trump and post-Trump era. And Tara Abados, if anyone wants to look it up, it's my favorite piece on, and I think actually it has effects into what is being talked about here, like reaching out to cis white men who are already on that side, and it's like, well, how do we relate black and white people, and what do white people need to do in order to sort of come around, or all of that? And she has some phenomenal prescriptions that I think are very, very smart and wonderful.
Yeah, you weren't kidding. We cannot read that on stream.
Nope.
But yeah.
Nope. But I'm still recommending it.
I'll give it a look. Yeah. See, there is a person who doesn't care about marketability.
Not at all. And again, the beauty of what she's written is it is deeply, deeply subversive. and it's subversive in a way where it identity politics people would be furious, which is hilarious because it's deeply about identity and all of that. So it's very good. It's very good and very out of nowhere, and so I always have to recommend it.
Well, thanks again for chatting, Brooks. Have a good night, and
Always.
we'll be back tomorrow at an undetermined time. We'll be returning to regular streaming hours next week. I apologize to everybody for falling off the routine, but we'll be going back to the more regular stuff. You'll be seeing more often, and we will be getting more video essays on a more regular in a more regular flow, because the last essay was a monumental amount of prep work. It wasn't even that like the ideas themselves were that complicated. It's just making sure that I was confident in what I was saying took so much work. So that's over. I've got a massive theoretical upgrade, I think, now. So look forward to more frequent and interesting video essays in the near future. Anyways, that's all for now. Have a good night, everyone. I'm going to run ads, and take care.